Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to BipolarLines, your go-to podcast and lifeline for real conversations, experiences, and resources to help you navigate loving someone with bipolar disorder and other mental illnesses. I'm Brooke.
And I'm Laura, and our hope is to be a relatable lifeline to spouses and loved ones by sharing our lived experiences and having those hard but necessary conversations. So stick around. Sometimes the most impactful conversations happen when you least expect it.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to Season 1, Episode 2 of BipolarLines. And today's topic is going to be separating your person from the illness. Laura, this is going to be a good one. It's going to be a tough one.
Yes, I think an important one, though, and a necessary
Super
one.
important. Yes. So I know that I had promised this episode, so here we are. And there's a lot to discuss, but maybe we can break this down into bite-sized pieces and, obviously offer our own experiences and how we've approached it. Laura, from the top, what does separating your person from the illness mean to you?
What it means to me is looking at bipolar as like a third person in your marriage. So there's me, there's Cody, and then there is this other person, even though it's inhabiting Cody's body when it happens,
Right.
that is bipolar disorder. And bipolar disorder is affected so many things: impulse control, memory, filtering things that are in your head that maybe shouldn't come out your mouth.
Right.
And actually, I think that's my definition, but I think the best definition I ever heard came from someone who has bipolar disorder on my TikTok. And he said it's like he's the passenger in a car that is his body, but he's not the driver. So
Love
he's a
that.
passenger in his avatar.
Yes.
And
Oh,
not the driver. Like that to me was like, whoa, that's exactly what's going on. He's like, I hate it. I hate it. I hate things that I'm doing, that I'm saying, and I can't stop it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that I've kind of made a similar reference to that, being like you're in the car, but you can't, you can't touch the steering wheel. All of a sudden that you're going really, really fast, but you're not pressing the gas. And all of a sudden you're braking, but you have no control over the brake, right? Like you're in the car, but you have zero control. Logically speaking, when you're going down a straight road, the car's going to go straight. But when your person is in an episode, they're doing circles, they're making hard lefts, hard rights. There is no logical sequence to how that vehicle is going down the road. I truly love that analysis that the person from your account said. That makes so much sense. I can go back in time and kind of see that happening with my husband. Like all of a sudden seeing him transition into specifically mania, where he no longer talks like him. In fact, he no longer looks like him.
Yes.
His eyes are void of emotion. They're darker. His pupils, that's something else. They're dilated. They're massive, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've referred to it as like speaking in cursive. It's not like he's slurring so much as maybe if he was drunk, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's this ongoing cursive conversation that like never stops, and you're trying to follow it. And I found myself like, trying to follow him, like with my physical body in my head, like what is happening, right? So you can see it. You can see when your person, for the most part, and that's my experience, but you can see your person transitioning into the episode. I think that is out of the gate one of the things that would make it easier for me to separate him from the illness. Is that maybe your experience?
Yeah, but that's late stage. So for me, I feel like I always used to catch it too late. So early stage, no. Early stage, maybe hypomania hits in my husband's case, and it's there's still light in his eyes, but there's so many creative ideas. You can see the sparks in his eyes just flying, and he's got great ideas, and he's super creative, and he's very productive. And yes, he might have that rapid pressured speech, but I can still follow it. I'm
Yeah.
still following it. I still know what's going on. I can tell he's getting amped up, sleeping a little less, eating a little less, but eventually it does hit this stage where, yeah, like when it's true mania, it is something different in the eyes, in the speech, in the irritability, in the sensical nature of his speech. And anxiety picks up really big time in mania for him. So lots of anxiety attacks. And I mean, it's so obvious to me now. But I know for people who follow me, they're always like, how do you tell? Like, how can you tell when they're manic and when they're not? And how can you tell when it's him and when it's not? And that is a really hard question to answer.
It really is. I think because it's specific to the person. Like how your person presents isn't always going to mirror how my husband or your husband presents. And
Right.
under this umbrella that we're talking about, specifically mania, Laura and I can pinpoint exactly like certain things that our partners will do. And we've checked off those boxes mentally, and we're like, yep, we know what is about to happen. But let's just take a step outside of our comfort zone of explaining our situations and talk about it from a 50-foot perspective. So we have someone who was just diagnosed with bipolar disorder, type 1, type 2. Doesn't really matter in this space. They just have the diagnosis, right? And in order to identify an episode, I think it is crucial to, number one, know that bipolar disorder is episodic, right? Personality is constant. Bipolar disorder is episodic. So they're going to come and it's going to go. Now, that come and go period could last for months and months at a time. Sure. But the source of that individual's truth is going to be reliant upon their personality. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Definitely.
Great. So if we know our person that was just diagnosed with bipolar disorder, we are pretty familiar with their comings and goings, their habits, things that upset them, even though we may not say all these things out loud, like we know. For example, if I leave dishes in the sink, then I know it's going to irritate my spouse or my person, whoever that is, right? So we know that. We may not say it out loud, but that's just a character trait. That's within their personality, because maybe they like things really tidy. Okay, so if we take all of those things, and I'm giving this example in hopes for the listeners to, kind of put their own situational spin on it. We take that person that we know and love so well. What is the tipping point, Laura, for when we are given pause as the spouses, partners, loved ones? What is our person doing all of a sudden that gives us pause, or should give us pause?
Yeah, it's to know your person's baseline. And when you first get with someone, a lot of people who talk to me, they just started dating someone, or they're not necessarily in as long-term of a relationship as we've been in, Brooke. I mean,
right.
What, like Cody and I are going on over 20 years, and I'm pretty sure you and Jeremy are too, right?
We're at 15.
Okay, so it's still like a really long time to understand the patterns and know your person. So whenever I post symptoms of mania on my social media, I occasionally will get comments from people that are like, well, everybody does that. A lot of people get a random burst of energy and tons of creative ideas and aren't sleeping for a couple days. And it's like, yeah, but it's not baseline. So I know what his baseline is. I know what his habit is. Like you said, it's almost like you have to give specific examples for maybe people to pick up on a specific example of their own. So one I would give would just be sleeping behavior. Cody is an alarm goes off, we hit the snooze kind of person. And that's just how it is. He will get up, but like his pattern was alarm, snooze, alarm, snooze, alarm, snooze, get up.
Yep.
When that changes from 3 days of all of a sudden alarm, immediately up, okay, like yeah, I mean maybe, and then the next day no alarm, up before the alarm. Next day, up at 4 a.m. Whoa, like this is not normal. That is beyond
so far
the baseline.
Away from baseline. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so to say, oh, waking up at 4 a.m. is unusual, a lot of people might be like, well, lots of people wake up at 4 a.m. Lots of people, don't hit the snooze button. Yeah, yes, but it's not his baseline. But like you said, giving examples hopefully helps. That's just one of the many examples of going past your person's baseline and
Mm-hmm.
realizing they might have entered into hypomania or mania.
Yeah. To reiterate, you're saying is two things can be true at the same time. Yes, people can get up at 4 a.m. and it's not a big deal. It's nothing
Right. It doesn't
significant.
mean they're manic and bipolar.
Right.
Right.
But also getting up at 4 a.m. could be symptomatic of an episode.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, it's hard to express that to just the general person that has no experience or no understanding. They just want to come in and, just kind of like, no, that's not true. Yeah, but this also happens. Yeah, I think
Yes.
sleep is a great example. And maybe let's back up just a minute and say, like, for Cody specifically, usually he will transition into hypomania and then mania. Is that typically how it works for him?
Yeah, and it's a train we just have never been able to stop. Like, we've tried to catch it at the psych and put in more psych meds or put in more antipsychotics. And, I don't know if it's just the fact that it's doomed to fail or that when he enters hypomania, I talk a lot about executive functioning. And executive functioning in the brain is in the frontal lobe of the brain, and it's in charge of all of our short term memory, being able to plan and organize, attention, sustaining attention is impaired, working
Mm-hmm.
memory, all of it is impaired. So, is he even taking his meds the way he's supposed to be when he enters hypomania?
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know exactly why, but we've never ever been able to stop it. It is once the train has left the station, we are doomed for it to happen. It's just
It's
the way it's been in our situation.
got it.
How about you guys?
So ours has been a little different over the years with Jeremy before last year. So within the last 12 months, he has not had a manic episode. He has had a few hypomanic episodes that never transitioned into mania, which was not the norm. To the best of my memory, had not actually experienced anything relative to hypomania, like at all. He would
Mm-hmm.
transition immediately into full blown mania. There was maybe an hour, is what I would say, from
That's so
onset
interesting.
symptoms to
Yeah.
full blown mania. I can recall being at my oldest daughter's, I don't think it was like a college prep meeting. So she was a senior, and we were there talking about, community colleges, scholarship, that kind of thing. And it was probably a 45-minute meeting. And maybe 20 minutes in, I got a text message from Jeremy that said, I want to go to a casino. Now, I can tell
Yeah.
you what that means in my relationship, my marriages. Oh shit.
Right. Right.
He is going to transition into mania.
Yeah.
Like that's what's going to happen.
Right.
And so I'm trying to like keep the conversation flowing to kind of see where he is. Because again, our experience has been I have like an hour to
Yeah, that's
understand what's about to happen, which also
yeah.
means keep him in the house, which also means take away certain things like the, debit card, credit card, whatever it is,
Yeah, yeah.
to keep the financial risk low, right? So by the time I had gotten home, his eyes were dark, void of emotion. He was talking a million miles a minute. He was angry. He was irritated. He was ready to leave the house. He was almost to the point of rage, but he was
Mhm.
also aware to a degree that he was angry,
Mhm.
and trying to like poke at me. And I just don't participate in that. So I didn't add fuel to the fire, right? I didn't help
Yeah.
that manic episode along. That is how he had presented relative to mania for 13 years.
Okay.
And over the last 12
That's
months,
so different than our
you flipped the switch and it was over and it was gone. And then he
yeah.
would stay in the full manic episode for, I want to say 4 to 5 days was pretty much the most common. There
Yeah.
were periods of time where he was manic for longer than that, but that was during a residential treatment stay. And oddly enough, the professionals didn't catch it either. Anyway, yeah,
There's always that.
so yeah, yay, yay. But I will say that the last full manic episode that he had in 2023, we were able to do a PRN medication, doctor prescribed, etc., which was specifically, this is the dose you are to take if and when you feel mania, right? He was able to go to sleep. It took a while. It took a lot of reassurance. It took a lot of encouragement to get him to stay, in the bedroom and trying to lay down, because that's a lot of medication. I mean, I wouldn't be able to function at
Right.
all,
Oh my
right?
gosh. I know. The
And
medication Cody can take manic and not sleep is
yeah,
shocking.
you're like,
It is
this can't be
shocking.
real. Is this a horse tranquilizer? Because
Right.
this is insane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But trying to keep him like, just lay down. I will bring you water. I will bring you, that doesn't work. That's not what they want. So they want to argue. They want to do all those things, right?
Right.
But I'm like, okay, fine. Try to get up. And it's, yeah, sit down. Sit down. So
Right.
yeah, medication worked that one time, and we haven't experienced a full manic episode since then. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that would look
Yeah.
like now.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm not sure at all. But I can tell you that trying to identify a hypomanic episode was real difficult for me,
Yeah.
because I was like, that's it. I
Yeah.
mean, not that's it, but also that's it. Like, I was so used to him moving so fast into mania that I was like, we're just chilling. We're just chilling over here in this space where, like, you're irritated but not irritated. You kind of have energy, but you don't have energy. You kind of want to be productive, but you don't. And all
Yeah.
these creative ideas and new business ideas and things. But, like, that's where we're staying. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's what this is.
Yeah, and
So,
Cody's baseline throughout just me being with him, I always like to describe it as he lives on the hypomanic side of life anyway. So we
gotcha.
don't really have any depressive episodes to
Right.
compare it to. So I feel like his baseline is very much this like largest person in the room personality, not always with the flight of ideas, but just very, I don't know, he's just a very large person, like in
Mm-hmm.
general, like his personality.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he would transition into hypomania, it was very confusing to me because it would be subtle, but I've learned through all of these episodes that now every subtle thing that happens, I'm like keeping notes. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
let's just track this for a couple days and see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's always been the challenge for me. But taking it back to separating him from this disorder, I really liked how in this book I read Loving Someone with Bipolar Disorder. Julie Fast is the author, and she's a person who has bipolar and I don't know, is in a long-term relationship with someone with bipolar. And I know that she always talked about like the bipolar conversation and recognizing when you're essentially talking to bipolar and not the person. So
Yep.
she really does get into then separating the person from bipolar disorder. And again, like you were saying, Brooke, you know your person better than anybody. I hear this all the time. Like, he's the most loving, sweet guy, and now he hates me and want a
Mm-hmm.
divorce and doesn't think he
Mm-hmm.
wants anything to do with me anymore. And I like, is that really him? And I mean, I can't know for sure, but it goes
Right.
back to like, well, what was his baseline? Because you can also unfortunately get narcissistic personality disorder in here sometimes. And like,
Yep.
they might be love bombing you. They might have a pattern of that just with their personality. But certainly with Cody, he sends me sweet TikToks all the time. He's, always writing sweet text messages. That hasn't changed in the 20 years I've been with him. And then, yeah, when he wants a divorce and calls me the most horrible things you could possibly imagine, that's really obvious it's not him. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean it's not hurtful, because then when I tell people that, they're like, well, then how do you get past the hurt? Well, yes, it is hurtful, but I think you have to do the work. How do I get past the work or the hurt? It's not just, poof, magically that disappeared. You have to put in the work. And in fact, this last time, we've never had to do this before, but the last manic episode was so hurtful. I was like, dude, like, I know that wasn't you. I really do. But I need you to hear everything you did and validate every single thing that happened to me this time. And the only way we were going to get to do that was through counseling, because there is no way we were going to be able to have those tough conversations week after week after week, because he thought I was just rehashing stuff and of course wants to move on. He's always actually very apologetic, mortified, horrified. But then he does, like, I talk about radical acceptance, and it's a strategy that he uses that's really, really helpful. And I'm glad for him. But it was not going to work for me for us to radically accept what had happened last time and move on. I
Sure.
needed that from a therapist, but I don't always. So,
Right.
I mean, it just depends, but you have to do something. You have to put in the work somewhere. Journal, see your own therapist, blow off steam to someone. It's not just going to magically disappear. And I worry if it doesn't, then you build resentment, and resentment is a relationship killer once that
It is.
enters. Yeah.
That is so true. Ugh. And I know that had to have been absolutely awful. I can just tell from our conversations over the last several years, since, knowing you on TikTok, that like we are a get up and go. Okay, this happened. We're going to move forward. Like we usually don't live in this space where we need that understanding and validation and to go back through those moments of those bigger hurts.
Yeah.
The ones that sit with you, the ones that you can't quite move through as easily, those are the
Exactly.
hardest to get over, right?
Yeah.
And I think honestly in this space, and I will say this to others as well, we have to reframe that conversation of get over it. That's not fair to ask a
No.
spouse, a
No,
partner, a
it's
loved one
not.
to get over
Totally.
it.
Totally.
It's unfair. We are
Yeah.
at a disadvantage when they are in an episode, right? We are basically asking ourselves to just turn off that light switch of feelings and emotions and just kind of go through the motions in order to get through it and survive it and protect our kids, protect ourselves. So it is
Yep.
unfair, in my opinion, to ask us to just get over it, move through it. What's done is done. I couldn't help it. And that's from, our person. I get that. I totally get that. But I refuse to use the phrase, I'm just going to get over this. No. As
No.
much as I help you manage
Yeah.
this illness, you are
Yep.
going to help me manage what happened to me and
Mhm.
you and our
Yeah.
children during this
Totally.
illness.
Yeah.
That way there's total validation and total understanding. And yeah, I can totally understand why you would want to go through counseling and be heard, because
Mhm.
that's a lot of feelings, a lot of emotion that you're trying to work through. And I have no doubt that, anger is going to be one of those secondary emotions that, is kind of the primary one in those situations. Because that's just kind of, especially when we're trying to mask the hurt,
Yeah.
because that's what
Right.
we've kind of been trained to do for so long. It's like, no, I'm
Totally.
not hurt. I'm just trying to work through the things that you said, because I know it wasn't you.
Yeah. Yep.
So just, just give me a minute. I'll get there. That kind of thing.
When it was hard this time, because a lot of times I'm not the bad guy. So in this last episode, I happen to be the bad guy. I always say that there's a bad guy, and it's not always me. Sometimes it's work, unfortunately, then you get fired. Sometimes it's your mom and dad. Sometimes it's, your friend. I mean, it could be a lot of things.
Right.
But
Sometimes it's a statue in somebody's yard that's red and ugly and they don't like red. Like, I'm not saying this shit makes sense all the time.
Right.
Honestly.
Sometimes it's a Dodge Ram that you thought was yours, even though you drove yours 100 miles in the opposite direction and then hitched a ride back to town.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's that.
Damn Dodge Rams.
But yes,
how dare they?
But this time it was me, and so I was the source of the fury. And so that's what made it harder, I think. Like, I can handle a one-off. I can handle you came home and started, just being irritable and whatever, and then you were gone. I'm not going to need to go to counseling for that. Even if you said something super horrible to me, I can still mostly get over that. It was just, I was the bad guy. And so anyways, while we were going through this in counseling, he just kept saying to the counselor, even though the counselor, the therapist, was like, she is not saying that. What Cody was hearing was, she hates me. She thinks it's me that did this. She doesn't understand it wasn't me. Like, I couldn't help it. Like, and I'm like, I do understand that. And then my therapist at least could back me up and be like, I am not hearing her say that. I'm hearing her say she does understand that this wasn't you, but she still needs you to hear it and to feel validated about it. And it was hard. It was really hard for him. Like, as much as it was hard for me, it was really hard for him to come back week after week and listen to more hurts that I needed to bring up and just get out on the table, because he kept taking it so personally. And
Sure.
It made me realize in those moments, even though he's always said this before, but it was more poignant in the therapy sessions this time, that even though it wasn't me, I have to take responsibility for it. For it. And I always say, like, when it was other people, I'm like, yeah, that isn't fair. It wasn't even him, like they don't realize that he wouldn't have done those things. But
Yeah.
then it was me, and I was like, yeah, like, I know it wasn't you, but we're still gonna have to go through this for me to be able to heal.
Yeah.
And it
Hmm.
did suck, and it is hard, and it's not fair, and it's just a horrible illness.
Yeah, for sure. I hate that. And I hate that for both of you because it's hard on everybody for sure. I
Hmm.
will say the one thing that you mentioned twice in this is that, like, that is not him. That is not the same. That's not been his baseline for 20 years, right? So, for all
Hmm.
the listeners, if you're trying to figure out, like, my person doesn't do anything that is a light bulb moment for me, it's not spending all this money or whatever, um, the light bulb moment might be rooted in things that are said. So it could just be if you've heard yourself telling a friend, like, I cannot believe he said that to me. He would never say, like, where did this come from? What did I do? All of a sudden, you're internalizing the terrible things that your person has said to you. Stop, take a breath, pause, and be like, have I heard this before?
Hmm.
Because I can guarantee you there's something very constant about episodes within bipolar disorder. Typically, your person will say or bring up or go about something in the same way every time. Has that been your experience, Laura? Something happens every damn time.
Yeah, in fact, I told the therapist this last time, the couples therapist, I could write the book on what Cody will say, do, think when he's headed into an episode, even though the triggers might be different and even though the
Yep.
focus might be different. But absolutely, there are things where you're like, oh no, oh no, no.
Hmm. No, no, no,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, it really
Yep.
is. Yeah.
And it's those moments, honestly, like when you start paying attention, wait, I have heard this before. Or you
Hmm.
realize, like, I've just told my best friend on the phone the other day, like, I am so tired of having the same argument over and over and over again. Write that stuff down because those are going to be your flags. Those are going to be your, let's take a moment, let's pause because these things keep happening and they're
Hmm.
likely going to be tied to an episode. And I think
Hmm.
that honestly, like, that's going to give you your baseline. And some of you may be sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, when my person says, you know, I think you're an asshole and I'm leaving and going to a hotel, like, I've heard that a million times. Okay,
Hmm.
flag.
Yeah, yeah,
Write it down. That's definitely
yeah.
going to be something. And that is just your, your indicator that something is coming. And then it's all of those things. Think about this logically, like all of those sayings that keep coming back around and back around and back around. If our person's brains were not impaired, wouldn't you think that we would stop having this circular conversation, that we would feel resolution, assuming your communication skills are at a level that is healthy, that we could work towards resolution and put it behind us, right?
Exactly.
But those things keep coming back up and around because there is no resolution during that episode.
Yeah.
I swear it's the first thing that comes up on the next episode, specifically
Mhm.
mania. Now, I think depression too, there are also very specific things that my husband specifically will say, and I'm sure others as well. But yeah, I start there. Start with, like you mentioned, Laura, find your person's baseline, figure out what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. And then maybe the next step would be like, okay, let's add in a few stressors. So,
Mhm.
what does your person's baseline look like? And they've had a really rough day at work. Okay, what does that look like? Do they blow off steam? Are they home later? Do they drink a few beers? Whatever that is, right?
Mhm.
Then let's add another stressor of children. If you have kids, they've had a rough day, the kids are home. What is that baseline? Oh, it's not really baseline. Like, what does that elevated baseline look
Yeah.
like?
You're
Okay.
right.
And then you have kind of like the leading up to point where in our minds, I think we justify it. We rationalize it like, yeah, well, they had a really bad day and the kids were being obnoxious, whatever the case may be. However, you justify it, I think that is kind of a blind spot for us, because if we justify all of those elevated baseline situations, then we try to explain away those initial manic episode triggers, and we don't even
Totally.
realize we're doing it.
Totally.
If we recognize that we're doing that first, then we can, number one, stop. But number two, figure out how to, right out of the gate, start separating our person from the illness, because we know their baseline, we know their elevated baseline. And then when an episode hits, it, you're kind of able to like put things in boxes. Like, okay, baseline's here, elevated baseline's here. Oh, that's mania. That's in this box, right? And then we can kind of make a little bit more sense of it. So all those sayings of, my person would never say these things to me. Oh my God, my husband called me those most awful names yesterday. He would never say that. And you feel super hurt and just devastated, broken that you would ever hear those words. And you're going to say it. I know you have. We've all said it. From someone who is supposed to love me. From someone who claims they love me. This is what I was told. Or this is how they talk about me. That is huge, right? We have to recognize those moments. And it's hard because we're hurt. We're hurt.
It's also hard because, like you said, we justify it sometimes. So a situation I can think of that happened once, oh my goodness, I feel like between 2006 and now, like Cody has just been rolling through episodes. We're in our longest state of not having one, but it was just, oh my gosh. I mean, actually, I have a pattern on my phone, Brooke. This is so interesting, but I showed Cody the other day because my mom is a calendar gal. She's a calendar boomer. And so she's got everyone's year anniversary of their death, not just their birthdays, not just their anniversaries, but when they died. And she happened to tell me that she had all of his hospitalizations. And when she rolled over the calendar, she writes all of those in. And I was like, will you give those to me? And so we were going through them. It was helpful. And we went through them, and his cycle, I am not even kidding, from 2006 to now was 10 months, then a year and 10 months. 10 months, then a year and 10 months. It was crazy. Wow. I showed him that the other day. So a year and 10 months in this one will be November. So November. Oh my gosh, we only have 3 months. I'm gonna be hypervigilant. I'm gonna be hypervigilant. But anyway, we were kind of rolling through them. I felt like I was living in oh my gosh, a survival mode. And I have a daughter with special needs. And we were at home one day, and I am, if you know me, I'm pathologically terrified of wasps and hornets. It's a problem. I've been diagnosed with PTSD because of them. Like, basically at 10, I had one fly in my ear, and then my parents tried to swat it, and it wasn't working, and it could just sting me 20 times over. And so all the buzzing and the noise and the feels and the everything is just horrible. So anyways, I probably need help for it, but right now everyone just accommodates my like psychosis, my temporary.
That PTSD
I know, my sister even sent me the book on EMDR. She's like, this would help you. But so anyways, we have these wasp traps. I'm sure you've all seen them, right? You put the little juice in, they're yellow. And so it was the start of the season, and you can buy filler, but they don't work. In my opinion, it does not work as good when you use the filler. Like if you buy the brand new one, it's way better. And so Cody kept telling me that he would buy the filler and fix the wasp trap for the summer that was coming. And he just hadn't done it. And so I just went out and got a wasp trap. This would not have normally made him mad. Okay. He knows, he's accepted I am a crazy person around bees. And even if we don't have the money, he would just know it's not something he would get mad at. Although we didn't have a lot of money at this particular time for some reason. And he came home, found out I bought it, and was just screaming at me, just like over the top reaction, right? Just like, I said I'd do it, just like going off the handle. But then I was like, well, he was kind of justified because he did say he would do it, but I didn't want him to do it anyways because those don't work as well as just buying a new one. So I was like, I'm willing to take a little heat, because of whatever. But he left the room, and my daughter came out of her room, and she was like, Mommy, is Daddy sick? And like, it's something we always talk about so that they know good behavior, what's bad behavior, what's acceptable behavior, what's not acceptable behavior, what's behavior we remove ourselves from, what's
Right.
behavior, And I was like, no, I know he's mad, but mommy made him mad. Like, it was mommy's fault. Like, it's no big deal. But there you go. That was me rationalizing it. I didn't even see it, even though my daughter was like, that's different. Like, she even
It
caught
was
it. Like, he doesn't
registering.
yell at her like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. We can easily just justify it and rationalize it to make it make sense.
Yep.
When, I mean, that's honestly, that's human nature. We want to, we want to make sense of it, and we want it to not be this big deal. But if we keep rationalizing and justifying those leading behaviors, those indicators, it makes it so much more difficult to see the big signs that are glaring, like, hey, I'm showing you that I'm manic or I'm hypomanic and you're not paying attention to me,
Totally.
And then you're
And the
caught off
other
guard.
thing, well, caught off guard, yes, but the other thing is that then I wasn't reinforcing what I tell people all the time. I get comments on my TikTok all the time that was like, why would you allow yourself to stay and be abused? I'm like, why are you
Yep.
assuming I allow myself to stay and be abused?
Mm-hmm.
That is never my message. So
Yeah.
normally in a manic situation, because this was a one-off, this was months of him never yelling and then him yelling, but I was like, well, I knew, I mean, I was justifying it again.
Sure.
But normally in that situation, it would have been like, no, like you don't get to talk to me like that. I would have set a boundary, but I didn't this time because I was justifying it. I just want to reiterate that like, also, because then people will understand that they're not talking to their person. So we have that. Some people are able to separate their person from bipolar, but then they still stay and they still allow themselves to be abused, and they justify literal abuse by saying, well, the person is sick and manic. No. Like, and you and I both feel very strongly about this too. Like, nope. Just because we can separate the person from their illness does not mean that we just stick it out and accept being abused. That is not.
Yeah, that doesn't mean we just sit down on the couch and just let it happen. Right? No, that's not it. Yes, they're sick, and yes, they don't have full control over how they think, how they feel. Absolutely, 1000% agree with that. But we have a responsibility for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our kids, to also, exit stage left. See you later. Gotta go. If you are unable to remove yourself out of the situation, remove your person from the situation, we're not saying stay. We're saying find a way, phone a friend, whatever it takes,
100%.
and get out of that.
That'll be another podcast, Brooke, is how to set boundaries. No, not how to set boundaries. How to follow through with boundaries.
Enforcement.
Because a lot of people now, I'm realizing, do understand how to set them, and they're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. They just do whatever they want anyways. Well, yeah, because there has to be consequences attached to the boundary.
Right.
Unfortunately, because the frontal lobe, again, is impaired. So even if they understood that there was going to be a consequence, or they were able to, in the moment, be like, uh-oh, don't go to the bar because she's going to get pissed and leave like she said she would. They might still do it anyways, and you still have to follow through. Like, you still, whatever your consequence of the boundary was. But that's another podcast.
Yeah, it's another episode. It's coming, don't worry.
It is. Yes,
but
definitely.
Tying it back to separating a person from illness. Again, we could sit here and give you example after example, situation after situation. I think the real process in this is, like we've said, establishing baseline, identifying elevated baseline, and triggers. Triggers are so important. If you know every time the weather changes, like sometimes seasons are a huge trigger. Moving, vacations are a huge trigger. Job changes, job loss, death of loved ones, new babies, adopting a baby, right? All of these like major life events are huge triggers.
I've put that on my TikTok too before, and the comments are, well, those are triggers for everybody. It's like, okay.
Two things can be true at the same time.
I love that. I need to start saying that as a response. Two things can be true at the same time. That's a beautiful response to that, because it's like, yes, I know, but like,
but I'm also specifically talking about the individual that has, the diagnosis of bipolar disorder, because those triggers can result in episodes that you don't have if you don't have this illness, right? Like sometimes I just want to be like, hello, is this thing on? you know? Jeez, drives me crazy. But yeah, I mean, that's a DBT skill, is acknowledging that two things can be true at the same time.
Is
And
it? Okay, I
yes,
love that. Yeah.
yeah, and to acknowledge that, like, I can have a bad day and say something mean, but also that doesn't mean I am a mean person.
Yes,
Two things can be
yes.
true at the same time, right?
Right, right.
It's to help that, like, catastrophic thinking and stuff like that. But that's a whole nother episode in itself too.
I love
So,
that though.
I want to also bring up something that my brain has failed me. It was gone. It was there, and now it's left
Sorry, I
me.
interrupted you because you
No,
were
no, no.
talking
You're
about
fine.
triggers and just those major life events being triggers. And
Yes.
those have been for Cody as well. In fact, we recently we moved in 2022, but the process started in 2021, maybe 2020 even. And we got into this house that we're in right now in 2022, and he had 3 episodes in that time
Oh,
because we had to move from our old house, then we went to an apartment, then he got triggered by these people next to us in an apartment. It was going to go really bad, so then we moved in with his parents while we were waiting for this house to build, and then we
oh,
finally got here. And Cody likes to name stuff. He names his trucks and his cars and his whatever.
cool.
And so we named this place The Last Stand because we are never effing moving again. Like that is one trigger we just can't go. We'll have
We
to
will
get maybe
avoid
a
it
new
at all
property.
costs.
Yes, you will have to drag us out of this place because that was horrible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think moving is one for Jeremy, but can't say that now. Things always change, right? So,
Right.
but
Knock on wood immediately.
Yep, nope, not doing that. Nope. But yeah, I think that's a great point. Triggers are really there to help you prepare for what's to come. That's not to say that every trigger that exists is going to automatically, result in your person having an episode. That's not what I mean. But it just helps to understand the track that your person took. So, this was a trigger and this is what happened. And as you can take time to just sit back and think about an episode if you don't know that your person is actually having an episode, but like you think maybe, just take a minute and kind of like go back through the motions of what happened, not just the back and forth conversations between you and your person because they were hard and hurtful and angry and you're still mad about it because you won't apologize because he didn't even know what he said or she didn't even know what she said. Not that. Take it back another step, another few days, another day, whatever it is. And I think that's where you will find the root of the trigger.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of visualize what happened and how your person was acting. And then you can kind of put them in this box called mania, right? Like, oh, that is the illness. That is when, as we call it, bipolar brain has taken over our person. They look the same, they kind of talk the same, but they are not acting the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's super helpful if you can't currently recognize an episode, would be to let's take a step back. And I should have said this at the top, like we are specifically talking about individuals who have truly been diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that's very important. If somebody has yet to have a diagnosis and you think it's possible, that's fine. But don't put them in a box that doesn't exist yet because there could be a lot of other things happening, right?
Totally. I would like to point out too that sometimes, even though we're kind of talking about the negative aspects of mania, sometimes it can actually look really fun. Mm-hmm. So just because we've been kind of talking about the moodiness or maybe the irritability, I remember this one time, oh my goodness, we live in Colorado and there's a ski resort here that's really popular called Breckenridge, and the Mountain Dew tour was here and there was a bunch of famous snowboarders. And I swear when Cody anyways kind of has this little good luck that follows him. Mm-hmm. I think it's this like, I don't know what it is about him, but it's just very magical. But when he's manic, right before he reaches the really bad manic stage, there is this really intense, like magical stage where people are drawn to him. He meets everyone. Well, you know, like he's the life of the party. It's like he's a magnet. All the action is coming to him. It's super fun. It's super exciting. That's how he was on this Mountain Dew tour. It was ridiculous. He was getting all of this free stuff. He was getting all of this attention. My kids were like, this is so awesome. This is so fun. And in the meantime, he can't find how to get around the town with the buses, which is something he knows secondhand. Like he knows it like the back of his hand. So I'm noticing this. So while my kids are noticing this like fun and life of the party and like, hey, and everyone's drawn to him, they think he's this like, just amazing guy. That is still uncharacteristic. Even though I said he always lives his life a little hypomanic, being that happy, being that gregarious, being that level of fun, no. That is not baseline. That's not baseline. It's fun.
That's a
like
very
my
good
kids
point.
definitely had a very good time. They definitely remember the Dew tour. And you know, my husband was like telling my son, he's like, man, that could be you up there. I'd be cheering for you. You know, like, and he was stoked. And my son's just got his stars in his eyes. But I was like, oh God, I have got to get off this mountain and back to Denver. Like there are no mental hospitals up here. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
You're like, this is gonna go bad. This is gonna go bad real quick.
Yep.
Sir, turn this thing around. I gotta go home. No, I totally get that. And that's a really great point because we have just been talking about a lot of the negative sides, which is, again, this kind of ties back to what I was saying before. Like sometimes you have to, you know, just step over all the things that are hurtful and, you know, things that you have a hard time forgiving because they're negative. As humans, we tend to do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to step over that negative dumpster fire and pay attention to these other things that are happening.
Yeah.
Jeremy has only had one episode where what he calls productive mania, and I'll beg to differ, but I will say he did clean all the gutters out at 4:00 in the morning. So I guess that was productive, but that was probably the only productive aspect of this episode. I cannot remember like what happened before or after, but my point is like, I was going to say he's never had like a fun, happy like Cody's had. It's usually all bad real quick. But that one time where he did clean the gutters at 4 in the morning, he was so amped up about it and so excited. And I was like, what?
Right.
Why would you do that at 4 in the morning? And he was like, what do you mean? You know, and he, you know, I'm like, my logical brain's over here going, yeah, no, that was dumb. Like you could have fallen, broken your back. Like nobody's out at 4:00 in the morning. What are you thinking?
Totally.
And he's like, what do you mean? I got everything done. You don't even care. Yeah. Which that, Laura, ties into the bipolar conversation that you will have, that we've all had until we know what it is, right?
Yeah.
What is the bipolar conversation?
Yeah. I mean, to me, the bipolar conversation is trying to rationalize with someone who is completely incapable of rational thought. It is so hard to explain to people. You keep thinking when you're communicating with your partner, you're like, well, if I just say it this way, or maybe they'll understand it if I just say, no, there's going to be no way. Like there is no way to rationalize who is someone who is just not capable of doing so. And that is the bipolar conversation. And that's what you, Brooke, were talking about when you're going in circles and circles and circles without anything ever resolving. Perhaps you are in a bipolar conversation.
That's another moment to go, I feel like Brooke and Laura may have mentioned something about this. What was that? Oh, crap. My person is not at baseline, and this is that bipolar conversation, right?
Yeah.
And that, we mentioned that in the first episode of the season to say, like, it does not matter how you say it, how often you beg, you plead, like a rose petal bucket of beer that's their favorite, and I promise you it is not going to matter. In fact, that rose colored bucket of beer is actually the devil. Like, how dare you even give that to them? It's not going to work the way you rationally and logically think it's going to, because they are not working rationally and logically.
No.
So you have to stop. You have to stop the bipolar conversation as soon as you are able to recognize it. As soon as that moment hits you in your feels where you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe he just said that to me. Or, holy shit, did she really just call me that? In those moments,
Yeah, like, or am I
Pause.
crazy? Like, did I
Yeah.
hear this wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Like, was this me, my perception off? Like, if you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
that, I think the most freeing thing that ever happened to me the very first time I went to a counselor after Cody's first episode, I was only, what, 25? I don't know. I knew nothing about mental illness. And NAMI, I got hooked up with them and they were like, you should go get a counselor. It'll help you. So I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went there to learn about bipolar. I wasn't even there for me. And so I was trying to explain to this counselor that I understand that in relationships it's 50-50 and that, you know, I had to have done something and I need to work on myself because I'm not quite sure like why he's not
Mm-hmm.
understanding. I'm not communicating well enough to him, even though
Right.
I'm a freaking speech language pathologist and that's actually like one of my strengths. And this person was like, Laura, stop.
Mm-hmm.
What if it's not your fault? And I was like, it was so freeing for her to even ask the question because that's what I was thinking. I'm like, this isn't my fault. Like, I don't know what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yo, but it has to be some of my fault because that's how relationships work. And, you know, she kind of talked me through it, but she was like, would any of this happen if he hadn't have been manic? Would any of these conversations happen? Would any of your reactions happen? Would any of his reactions like that happen? And the answer was no. And then she was like, so the fault is not on Cody or you. The fault is on bipolar.
Yep.
And
How
that was
freeing.
so freeing. It was very freeing.
Yep.
Yeah. And that doesn't
That's
mean
a
that
great point.
I can't take steps to not trigger him, like you mentioned. Like, you know,
Right.
maybe we don't want to be screaming in their face knowing that they're manic. That's probably not going to be
Probably not a good
helpful.
idea.
I probably
0 out
do
of
it.
10. Do not recommend that.
That's
Please
never
don't.
gonna work. But yeah, so I mean, maybe we can in those instances work on ourselves and our responses in that way. But yeah, just really recognizing that was really freeing.
Yeah, for sure. As you mentioned, you were talking about it earlier. I cannot tell you the number of times in that circular conversation that I have had to say, no, that's what I just said. Like, I literally just said those things.
That too.
And then you hear, no, that's what I said. And I'm like, do I need to record us? Because I know for a fact those words just came out of my mouth. You're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. You always bring this up. This is always how you spin it to make it that you are not at fault every time.
I'm just laughing because I've said the exact same words out of my mouth too.
Yeah.
Like, do I have to record this? Like, because that is, it's the bipolar conversation.
It is.
Even if you recorded it and you played it back, you guys, it's still not gonna work because
they can't hear it.
No,
they cannot hear it.
No, exactly.
It's like, yeah, that was me doing the talking, but it's your voice, and you're like, is this thing on? Do you?
Or I was just repeating after you. I said it because you said it, or it's just it could be anything.
I said it first. Right? Yeah, but you wouldn't have said that because I only said it, or, and you're just like,
yes, exactly.
No. Nope. You feel crazy.
You do.
Okay. So listeners, you're sitting there and you're like shaking your head and going, oh my gosh. Or, you're acknowledging like you've been in this spot. That is what we're talking about. Any of those moments and instances where they are not at baseline and they are acting out of character, right? Saying the things you thought they'd never say, and you're feeling these types of way. Here's your sign.
Yeah, exactly.
Your person is in an episode, and it is time to recognize that so that you can separate them from the illness.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to dive real quick into, okay, great. We've separated our person from the illness. What do we do, Laura? What do we do? So we can't have this bipolar conversation because Brooke and Laura have been like, don't do it. Don't do it. No. Okay, great. What am I supposed to do? Right?
Yeah. And go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's where our next conversation on boundaries come in. And so it's really knowing how to, because that is kind of an emotional mind F, right? Like, so unfortunately at that moment, you likely are feeling emotionally abused, honestly. So when that happens, it's identifying what is hurting you in this episode and taking steps to put in place boundaries with consequences, because I said it on the last podcast and I'm going to keep saying it because I absolutely loved it from Rachel. I had made the comment, we can't love our person with bipolar disorder through an episode. And she's like, yes, you can. And she's like, but you love them through the use of boundaries. Yeah. And I was like, and in that way, we also love ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is so powerful because that is what you have to do. And we talked about it last episode, but it's counterintuitive to do that because you
Mhm.
think, well, if I just love them more, if I just give them more,
Mhm.
attention, if I just give them more care. And it's almost like the opposite is true. It's almost
Yeah.
like you said, Brooke, like all that love, all that attention, that rose-colored beer bottle is makes it worse.
Yes.
It doesn't actually make it better. And
It
so, like,
yeah.
if you have any chance of helping both you and them through it, it's through the use of boundaries.
And the opposite action really for
Yeah,
us.
the opposite action
What we
for
think
us.
we should
Yeah,
do, we should do the
totally.
opposite. Every time
Totally.
we think we're gonna justify, defend, beg, and plead, we should shut up. We should
Yeah.
just not even go there, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that's brilliant. That's great. We will just carry forward into that conversation about boundaries. But until we get there, I'm going to share the one phrase that I've used that has worked for me when I'm unable to create a boundary, when I need to shut this conversation down right now. What do I say? And Jeremy Benton, if you were listening, I need you to sign off right now. Okay? Okay, thank you.
Well,
All
I'm
right.
waiting on pins and needles.
Yeah. If you hear this, it'll ruin it. Anyway, the thing that I say is, I I am sorry that you are feeling that way. If you still feel that way in insert period of time, if he's manic, if you still feel this way in a week, we'll talk about it again. Shut it down. Basically, the boundary here is I'm done talking. The
Mm-hmm.
consequence is I'm still done talking and we're not going to talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you walk away. They're going to push and pry because that's what the illness does. What do you mean you don't want to talk about it? We're going to talk about it now. How do you think I feel about it? Stop. Oop.
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to talk with you about this right now. If you still feel the same way, you literally like hit play. You're like a tape recorder
It's
and
a
you repeat
mantra.
it
I was taught that too.
over and over again.
Yep.
No matter what they say, you walk away. They follow you. They're trying to act all big bad and whatever. Like, what, whatever. Like my husband has done. I'm just like, I'm not going to talk to you about this. If you still feel the same way, and then they just get
Mm-hmm.
frustrated because I'm
Mm-hmm.
not adding fuel to
Mm-hmm.
the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go find something else to get pissed off about or
Yep.
focused on or whatever.
And they will because they're manic, and
Yes,
that's the
they
nature
will.
of mania.
Yeah.
So
So
eventually
just
they
don't feed
will
it.
lose attention. Yeah, I love that. I was taught that too, and it was because I kept feeling like I would get roped into an emotional conversation. So I would get roped into something like, you don't even love me. Do you even care about me? And
Mhm.
then I would
Mhm.
defend myself, be like, of course I care about you. How could you say that? Like, oh my God. It's just, that's not what you do. That is
Mm-mm.
not what you do, but that's what I was doing. And I remember my very, very first advice was from that therapist that was like, we need to adopt something that feels comfortable for you, but that you repeat, like you just said, on playback, and it never deviates. This is
Yep.
always your answer. And so the answer was, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I do love you and I'm not talking about this anymore. I'm sorry you feel that way. I do love you though, and I'm not talking about this. Oh, you don't love me, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I
Play.
do love you and we're not talking about this anymore.
Yep.
It was just over and over and over, and it was effective. And
Yep.
yes, like that's a great strategy. If you don't do that, if you don't have a mantra like that, you are in a bipolar conversation in that circle, in that little whirlwind, in that tornado, just going around and around and around and around. And where we
Rocking.
stop, nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Right?
We may be in Canada before it's over. Who knows? Yes. And you're exhausted by the end of it. And so the goal in today in this conversation is to help you see that it doesn't have to last for hours and hours and hours. And I know many of you are sitting there shaking your heads, feeling so heard or feeling so frustrated because maybe this just happened. I get it. We get it. We have been there. It doesn't
Yes.
have to last hours. I
Yes.
promise. You have the control to remove yourself from those conversations as they're starting or the moment
Yeah.
you recognize
I
it.
love that.
So your phrase doesn't have to be anything other than, I'm sorry you feel that way. If you still feel this way in a week, we can talk about it again. Period. Play. Stop. Play. Stop. Play. Because it
Yes.
really does apply
It does.
to whatever it is they're upset about or they're,
Yeah.
focused on.
I like that better than even the one I was giving him last time because he was really stuck on selling his truck. And I was like, if you still feel this way, like I wasn't even doing it as a strategy, but it was what I was repeating. I was like, I
Yeah.
am not talking about your truck until you're not manic anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
that was my downfall, because that second part was, I'm not manic. I
Mm-hmm.
will feel this way. And I
Yep.
kept
Don't
saying
kill me
that, and
out.
that one was not effective. So it would
Yeah.
have been much more effective to just give the timeline, to
Yeah.
just say,
Yep.
yeah, if you
Me. It's
feel
about
this way in
me.
a week, we can talk about this a week from now
Yep.
if you still feel this way.
You validate how they're feeling, which is they are
Yeah.
not okay. And then
Yeah.
you take yourself out by saying, nope, see you later, not doing it. Because, yeah, you give them an out and they'll take it in
Oh
a
gosh, yeah.
heartbeat. In fact, they are like poking and trying to get you to say, like,
Masters.
oh, no, I'm not. Oh,
Masterful.
no, Yes.
Mhm.
So manipulative. Well, also so charismatic. That illness, I tell you what. I tell you what. Yeah. So think about your mantra, think about your person. Of course, we're always open to having more conversations about this, but hopefully you can kind of see, like, okay, separate my person from the illness. I have to take these steps, take this approach, and it does require effort on our part. But the
And I
flip
think
side
that,
is no effort means everything hurts and everything's
yeah,
intentional and
yeah,
my person hates me, which is not true.
that is
It's
not
just
true.
not
And
true.
so I think those are important takeaways. The important takeaways are to separate your person from bipolar, because that is not the person. And then also how to stop a bipolar conversation by repeating
Hmm.
a mantra like that. What do you
Yes.
think, Brooke?
I love it. I love that. Yes, absolutely. Repeat the mantra, recognize your person as in an episode by, establishing baseline. That would be
Yeah.
the takeaway
Yeah,
for
totally.
sure.
For sure.
All right, everybody. New episodes are going to be dropping every other week and will be available across most all of the podcast platforms. But follow us on social media, and we have a Facebook discussion group. Go grab it. It's called BipolarLines Pod. 2 words. Laura, where can the listeners find you?
Yes, I am primarily on TikTok at the BP spouse. And Brooke, how about you?
I'm also on TikTok at break_the stigma. And you can also find me on Instagram at the Brooke Benton. And of course, you'll see us in the Facebook group.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. As always, thank you so much for being here, for listening, for showing up for your person. We'll see you next time. Music written and produced by Barry Jolly, all rights reserved.